I sergeant Solson, woman, yes, our face!
Imagine being born into a world of unimaginable wealth and power. You are a queen, a princess, the wife of a renowned general. Your days are filled with fine silks, lavish banquets, and the respect of an entire nation. Now, imagine losing it all in a single, brutal moment. This was the harrowing reality for countless noblewomen in the ancient world, whose lives were shattered by the relentless expansion of the Roman Republic. When Roman legions conquered a new territory, they didn't just take land and gold. They took people. And among the most prized captives were the women of the vanquished elite. Just days before, these women commanded servants and held influence in the halls of power. They were mothers, daughters, and wives, cherished and protected. But the moment their city walls were breached, their status evaporated. They became spoils of war, their fates now in the hands of their conquerors. Before they could even process the loss of their homes and families, they were herded together, stripped of their fine garments and jewelry, and forced into a grueling march back towards the heart of the Empire Rome. The journey itself was an ordeal designed to break them. Chained and exhausted, they were paraded through towns and villages as living trophies of Roman might, their despair a public spectacle. Upon arrival in Rome, their nightmare was far from over. They were handed over to slave dealers, men who specialized in transforming human beings into commodities. For these noblewomen, the process was particularly cruel and methodical. It was about more than just preparing them for sale. It was about systematically erasing their former identities. The dealers understood that a queen who still thought of herself as a queen was a liability. So, the first step was often isolation and humiliation. They were kept in crowded, squalid conditions, a stark contrast to the palaces they once called home. This psychological assault was relentless, designed to strip away any lingering sense of self. Next came the physical transformation. Their long, often elaborately styled hair, a symbol of status and femininity in many cultures, was unceremoniously sheared off. They were scrubbed raw, not for hygiene, but as another act of degradation. Their bodies were inspected like livestock, their teeth, their limbs, their skin, all assessed for market value. They were forced to wear coarse, simply tunics identical to every other captive, erasing any visual distinction of their noble past. They were often given new, generic Latin names. Their birth names that once carried the weight of dynasties forbidden and forgotten. The goal was to make them anonymous, to sever the last threads connecting them to their lineage and their history. Then came the training, a brutal re-education in submission. They were taught to respond to commands in a language they barely understood, to perform menial tasks they had never imagined doing. Any sign of defiance, any flicker of their old authority, was met with swift and harsh punishment. They were being broken, reshaped into the docile, obedient property that Roman buyers desired. The slave market was the final, terrifying stage, displayed on rotating platforms, often with signs detailing their age, skills, and sometimes their prestigious or a cruel marketing tactic to fetch a higher price. Potential buyers would prod and examine them with cold indifference. For these women, the sale was the ultimate moment of powerlessness. They were sold to the highest bidder, their futures decided by the whims of wealthy Romans. Some might end up as domestic servants in a patrician household, a life of endless toil. Others, particularly the young and beautiful, could be forced into roles as concubines, their bodies belonging to their masters. A rare few, possessing valuable skills like literacy or weaving, might find a slightly better position, but they were still property, forever subject to their owner's will. The queen who once ruled a nation could now be found scrubbing floors or serving wine, a ghost of her former self, her past a secret she dared not speak. This brutal process ensured that the women who once walked the corridors of power were completely remade, their identities shattered and rebuilt to serve the vast, unyielding machine of the Roman Empire. Thanks for watching, and if you found this piece of history interesting, be sure to subscribe for more. Picture the grandeur of ancient Rome, Colosseum, the aqueducts, the legions marching in perfect formation. We often imagine a world of emperors, senators, and philosophers, but beneath this glittering surface was a darker reality, a system so deeply embedded in Roman life that the empire simply could not have existed without it. I'm talking about slavery. In Rome, this wasn't just a practice. It was the engine that powered society, from the farms that fed its citizens to the mines that supplied its wealth. From the grand villas of the rich to the public baths, slave labor was everywhere. It was a normal, legal part of life. People were bought, sold, traded, and even inherited just like property, like a piece of land or a chariot. There was no moral debate about it in the way we'd think of today. For the Romans, it was just the way things were. So, how did someone become a slave? The most common way was through war. When Roman legions conquered new lands, they would bring back thousands of captives. Entire populations could be enslaved. Others were born into it. If your mother was a slave, you were a slave from birth. People could also be enslaved for falling into debt, or by being kidnapped by pirates and sold on the open market. Imagine a bustling Roman city like Ephesus, or even Rome itself. In the heart of the city, you'd find the slave market. This wasn't a hidden, shady affair. It was an open, public spectacle. Slaves, often stripped to show their physical condition, would be displayed on raised platforms. A plaque, called a titulus, would hang around their neck, listing their origin, age, skills, and any known defects. Buyers would walk through, inspecting them like livestock. They would check their teeth, their muscles, and ask them to perform tasks to test their abilities. The price of a human being varied dramatically. A strong, healthy man in his prime, suitable for hard labor in a mine or on a farm, might fetch a moderate price. A skilled artisan, a cook, a musician, or a well-educated tutor from Greece could be incredibly expensive, costing many times more. Appearance was also a huge factor. Beauty, especially in young men and women, commanded a high price for domestic service in wealthy households. But there was a particular category of slave that was both highly prized and deeply feared: the captured noble. Imagine a queen, a princess, or the wife of a defeated general, suddenly finding herself in chains. These individuals were incredibly valuable. They often possessed education, refinement, and a certain prestige that a wealthy Roman might want to display in their home. Owning a former noble was a status symbol, a living trophy of Roman power. However, these were not docile servants. They remembered a life of freedom, of command, of respect. They carried a fierce pride that could not be easily extinguished. They knew what it was to wield power, and this memory made them dangerous. They were more likely to resist, to plot, to escape, or to influence the household in subtle ways. A captured noblewoman was a beautiful, exotic prize, but also a constant, simmering threat, a reminder that fortunes could turn in an instant. This system, as brutal as it was the foundation of the Roman world for centuries. It shaped their economy, their social structure, and even their understanding of what it meant to be human. It's a stark and uncomfortable part of their history, but one we have to understand to truly grasp the complexity of ancient Rome. Ever wondered what the first thing a Roman slave dealer took from a captured noblewoman was? It wasn't her fine silks, her sparkling jewels, or even her freedom in the most obvious sense. The first, most brutal theft was something far more personal, far more profound. It was her name. Imagine being born into a world of power and privilege, your name echoing through halls of marble, a symbol of your lineage, your history, your very identity. A name like Boudica, a queen of the Iceni, whose name meant victory. Or Zenobia, the warrior queen of Palmyra, whose name was tied to the divine. These weren't just labels. They were declarations of who they were, where they came from, and the power they wielded. But in the cold, calculating hands of a Roman dealer, that all vanished. A noblewoman's name, rich with history and heritage, was seen as a liability. It was a spark of defiance, a reminder of a life before chains. A name meant history, and history meant resistance. So they erased it, systematically. A queen became simply Regina and a princess, Principessa. These weren't new names. They were classifications, generic labels stamped onto human beings, like cargo. Think about the psychological impact of this. Your name connects you to your family, your ancestors, your gods. It's the first word you learn, the sound you respond to instinctively. To have it stripped away is to be severed from your past, to be told that your history no longer matters. All the prestige of a family title, the pride of royal blood, the honor of noble status, all of it, dismissed in an instant. The dealer's goal was simple: break the spirit before the body. By erasing her name, he was attempting to erase her will to fight back, to remember who she was. This wasn't just a random act of cruelty. It was a calculated strategy of control. A person without a name is easier to control, easier to sell, easier to dehumanize. They become a blank slate, a commodity. The dealer could now invent a new, simpler identity for her, one that suited her new role as property. She might be given a name based on her origin, like Sierra for someone from Syria, or a simple Latin name like Lucia. These names had no history, no power. They were designed to be forgotten, just as the woman herself was expected to forget her past. This process was a cornerstone of the Roman slave trade. By stripping away individual identities, they created a more manageable, less rebellious workforce. For the captured noblewoman, it was the first of many degradations. She was no longer a person with a story, a family, or a future she had once envisioned. She was now an object, defined only by her price and her new, meaningless name. It was a brutal, efficient method of psychological warfare. And it shows us something crucial about power. It's not just about physical chains and walls. True subjugation begins in the mind. It starts by attacking a person's sense of self, their connection to their own story. By taking her name, the Romans weren't just taking a word. They were taking her world. They were attempting to extinguish the fire of her identity, hoping that without it, she would simply accept her fate. But we know from history that the human spirit is not so easily broken. Even without their names, many of these women held on to their identities in secret, their stories passed down, whispered in the shadows. A testament to the enduring power of who they were, no matter what they were called. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this piece of history, have you ever wondered why ancient empires, especially Rome, put so much emphasis on public spectacles? We often think of gladiator games and grand parades, but there's a darker, more psychological side to these displays. It's a story not just of power, but of control, and it was often written on the lives of captured women. In Roman society, there was a deeply ingrained belief that humiliation created obedience. It wasn't about simple punishment or revenge. It was a calculated strategy to break the spirit and ensure submission. Imagine a noblewoman from a conquered land. In her own culture, she was a symbol of status. Her life lived in private, shielded from the public gaze, surrounded by servants and high walls. Her visibility was carefully controlled, a sign of her importance and honor. Then, the Romans arrive. Her city falls, her family is scattered, and she is captured. What happens next is a masterclass in psychological warfare. She isn't hidden away in a dungeon. Instead, she's forced into the most public of spaces. She becomes a centerpiece in the Roman triumph, a massive victory parade through the streets of Rome. Picture this scene. The conquering general rides in a golden chariot, cheered by thousands. Behind him, a long procession of spoils gold, weapons, and people. And there, among the captured kings and warriors, are the noblewomen. Stripped of their fine clothes, sometimes in rags, they are paraded for everyone to see. The very people who once averted their eyes in her presence now stare, judge, and jeer. This forced visibility was a profound form of humiliation. The woman who once controlled who saw her is now completely exposed, an object for the consumption of the Roman mob. Her private world has been shattered and replaced by a public nightmare. Every stare is a reminder of her powerlessness. Every shout is a confirmation of her new, low status. This wasn't just a one-day event. This experience was designed to leave a permanent scar. The psychological message was crystal clear and brutal. You are no longer who you were. Your status, your honor, your very identity has been taken from you. You belong to Rome now. The memory of this public shame would follow her for the rest of her life, a constant, silent force, ensuring she would never again dream of rebellion or defiance. By turning a person's honor against them, by transforming their privacy into a stage for their own debasement, the Romans weren't just winning wars on the battlefield, they were winning them in the minds of the conquered. They understood that true, Lasting control isn't just about chains and walls. It's about breaking the will. Forcing these high-status women into the public eye was one of the most effective and cruelest ways they achieved it. It taught one single, terrifying lesson. Resistance is futile, because we can take everything from you, even your own dignity. This strategy reveals a chilling aspect of Roman power dynamics. It shows that they saw control not just as a physical matter, but a deeply psychological one. They knew that by dismantling a person's social standing and personal honor in the most public way imaginable, they could create a form of obedience that was more potent than any physical restraint. It's a stark reminder that throughout history, have you ever wondered how someone's spirit can be systematically broken? It's a dark but crucial piece of history to understand. Slave dealers, in their horrific trade, weren't just transporting bodies. They were actively working to shatter the minds of the people they enslaved. They discovered a chilling truth. A person with a broken will was easier to control and sell than someone who held on to their pride and identity. This process of psychological destruction was methodical and cruel. One of the first and most devastating tactics was isolation. Imagine being ripped away from your family, your friends, everyone you know and trust. Women, in particular, were often separated from any familiar faces, leaving them completely alone in a world of strangers and enemies. The comfort of a shared language, a knowing glance, or a supportive touch was stolen from them. This sudden, forced solitude was the first step in creating a profound sense of helplessness. Next, they weaponized silence. The vibrant sounds of community laughter, stories, songs, and simple conversation were replaced by an oppressive quiet. People were forbidden to speak to one another. This wasn't just about preventing escape plans. It was about severing the bonds that make us human. Communication is how we build relationships, share our fears, and find strength in it. This process is known in modern psychology as learned helplessness. When someone is repeatedly exposed to a stressful, inescapable situation, they eventually stop trying to change their circumstances, even when opportunities for escape might arise. They learn that nothing they do matters. Slave dealers intuitively understood this principle centuries ago. They created an environment where resistance seemed not only futile but impossible. They aimed to erase a person's identity, their history, their very sense of self, and replace it with the identity of a slave-compliant, submissive, and broken. Understanding this dark psychology is not about dwelling on the horror, but about recognizing the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Despite these systematic efforts to break them, countless enslaved people resisted. They found ways to communicate in secret. They held onto their cultural traditions. They formed new bonds, and they never stopped fighting for their freedom, whether through open rebellion or quiet acts of defiance. Their stories are a powerful testament to the fact that even in the face of unimaginable cruelty, the human will to be free. Have you ever wondered what really happened before the gavel fell at a Roman slave auction? It wasn't just about bringing people to a marketplace. It was a systematic process of erasure, a chilling transformation from person to property. Let's delve into what Roman society called preparation, but what the captives themselves knew as the end of their world. Imagine standing, stripped of everything that made you who you were. The first thing to go was often the hair. In many ancient cultures, hair was far more than just decoration. It was a powerful symbol of identity, status, and even spiritual connection. Long, intricate braids might signify your tribal heritage. A particular style could denote your marital status. And for many, a full head of hair was a sign of vitality and freedom. By cutting it short, often crudely, the Romans weren't just giving a haircut. They were severing a connection to the past, to family, to culture. This single act was a potent form of psychological control, a visual declaration that you no longer belonged to yourself. Your beauty, your individuality, your freedom, all sheared away. Next came the personal items. Think about the small things you carry that define you. A ring passed down from your grandmother, a necklace given by a loved one, a simple cloth pouch holding a token from your homeland. These weren't just objects. They were repositories of memory and identity. For the captives, these items were confiscated without a second thought. A warrior's amulet, a mother's keepsake, a child's simple toy, all taken away. This wasn't just theft. It was the deliberate stripping of personal history. By removing these symbols, the captors were erasing evidence of a life lived before bondage. It was another step in turning a human being into a blank slate, an anonymous commodity ready for the auction block. The final step was the removal of clothing. Clothes, much like hair, spoke volumes in the ancient world. The type of fabric, the colors used, the style of the garment, all of it communicated who you were and where you came from. A Celtic warrior's plaid, a Germanic tribeswoman's embroidered tunic, a scholar's robe from the East, these were all replaced. Sometimes with a simple, coarse loincloth, sometimes with nothing at all. This forced nakedness was the ultimate act of humiliation and objectification. It exposed the individual not just physically, but emotionally, leaving them vulnerable and powerless before the eyes of potential buyers. Their bodies were no longer their own sacred space, but were now mere flesh to be inspected, prodded, and assessed for strength, health, and utility. This entire process, from the cutting of hair to the stripping of clothes, was meticulously designed. It was a production line of dehumanization. Its goal was to break the spirit, to erase the past, and to make the individual psychologically receptive to their new reality as property. Doctors would often be present, not for the captive's well-being, but to assess their physical condition for the sale. They would check teeth, examine muscles, and look for signs of disease or weakness.